Here we are. Carol Birch, thank you so much for visiting us from Connecticut. This is the Storytelling by and for Adults series on this edition of November 2022. And Carol Birch, it's a tremendous honor that you're with us. Please tell us a little bit about your work. There's a great deal to tell about your work, but tell us and then tell us a story. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to tell a personal story, and it's very short. So I will take a moment just to say thank you, and I want to thank June and let me look at your name so I say it right. I heard Srabanti and June and the last storyteller, Rama, and I was very moved by all three, and for different reasons. And the first two folk tales really, I love folk tales so much. I love their depth. I love the way they speak through metaphor and analogy and about the human condition. So I was sitting here thinking, oh, why am I telling a personal story? Because so I appreciate, even though it's a completely different kind of personal story, Rama, it was so lovely to hear that, yes, that these are the stories that just move us through in life, and they don't have the stickiness that folklore has. Folklore, you can tell it to different cultures and there's some stickiness, but these personal stories are not able to be told just sort of, oh, let me take her story there and adapt it to my culture and tell it. Yes and no, that's it. You understand what I mean by stickiness? I hope. I don't know if that it's a good word for translating for meaning, but this is my first attempt at what I would call a moth style story, a story that is based on a certain being funny and turning. So you are here for my inaugural moth kind of storytelling. So I shall follow my own words of advice when I'm teaching storytelling. I always say, if you're going to do it, sin boldly. So I'm going to sin boldly and tell you a personal story. I might glance at my own screen because I'm so nervous. I've only been doing this for 52 years, but I still get really nervous. My husband, Richie, likes to have important conversations in the car. We're a couple who goes for long drives, but we not only go for long drives, we go for long drives and then get coffee and stop some beautiful place and sit in the car and have serious conversations. And I just love how my 77-year-old husband has retained that teenage soul that loves to have important conversations with his girl in that sacred space of teenage life, the automobile. But I might not have become Richie's girl or his wife if I hadn't first gone for a ride with a stranger in a truck in North Carolina 40 years ago. There isn't enough time to go into all the reasons that I scare easily, but I do. I don't have to go see horror movies because I have the imagination to see horrible things all too often. And that's why it makes it sort of remarkable that I fly to strange places and go sleep in strangers' homes for storytelling events. Usually when you fly in, someone picks you up at the airport. I prefer a woman to pick me up because I just feel a little more comfortable. I mean, I think most girls were raised on stories about not getting into cars with strange men. And yet as storytellers, we do this all the time. I emerged from the baggage claim area, and I walked out and I surveyed the men who were standing in front of me. There were no women, just men in those sort of cheap, droopy black jackets that are supposed to look like suits, holding up signs, cardboard with names scrawled on them. No one had my name. And then a man came walking in, and he held up a piece of cardboard with my name. So I smiled at him, and he did not return my smile. So a little sense of anxiety just ticked up. Why didn't he smile? All right. I walked out, followed him. Oh my heavens. He had a pickup truck with a gun rack. At least there weren't any guns in it. But my sense of apprehension just ticked up more. Well, I struggled to get into the cab, and I had high heels, but I moved over and I put my hand on the door handle so that I could escape if I needed to very quickly, except what a foolish idea. Where was I going to escape? I mean, here I was, a woman in high heels riding through a state I had never been in before on a rural road. And it occurred to me that nobody actually knew where I was. This is all before cell phones. No one knew where I was. So where would I escape to? Well, he started talking. He didn't talk to me. He started lecturing me about political opinions I did not share. And his arrogance that somehow his opinions were correct and unassailable just made me seethe inside. I sat there thinking, I am so tired of how men have all the power. But at that moment, he happened to ask why I had on short breeches. Now, I was so excited. I finally had an entree into the conversation. So I explained about how much easier it is to travel in slacks, and because it was expected to be warm, I figured in the South, I had on these short pants, which back then we called pedal pushers. And today we would call them cropped pants. But I kept talking. I started talking how beautiful the countryside was. I started asking him about the festival, where it was, what the weather was supposed to be. He cut me off. He went back to his lectures. And I went back to my sullen slumping in the corner, arms crossed, thinking again, why do men have all the power? I felt like he was sucking up all the air in that cab and leaving me gasping. Now, an unfamiliar voice in my head said, do men have all the power? What? Now, I don't know about you, but I have an absolute Greek chorus in my head comprised of me, myself, and I, and they argue a lot. They started arguing inside. Here's this, who is this saying we have power? Another voice inside me is going, wow, I have power? Yes, the other voice answered, yes, you do have power. I mean, let's face it, Birch. If a man is uptight, you act loose. If a man is loose, you act like the proverbial librarian you are. Why are you surprised when men sense the antagonism you feel? This other voice is saying, I have power. My life doesn't depend on this man's mood or his opinion. Another voice said, Birch, this man is not your father. Well, I have to tell you, my mother always said, honey girl, because that's what they called me. Honey girl, all men are babies. Of course, your life is meaningless without them. You have to learn to jolly them along. Wrong, Mom. No, I do not need to jolly this man along, but I don't need to oppose him. I don't need to confront him. I don't need to agree with him. He means nothing to me and my safety. This was not a situation where my physical safety was threatened. And who's in charge of my mental safeguards? Oh, wow. And a blockage the size of a container ship in the Suez Canal moved in my heart and kind of in my soul. And I relaxed. My face relaxed. He kept going on, and I just watched the show. And my behavior began to change that day in that truck 40 years ago. I met Richie 2 years later. And after lots of drives and conversations over hot coffee in and out of cars, we married. Is it easy being married? Well, if any of you are, I think it is not easy because there are power struggles that enter all kinds of relationships, and they are magnified somehow within a marriage. But Richie and I work on right-sizing our attitudes. We work on focusing on each other's good qualities. And we've recently started attending a group where they talk about couples living not just as lovers and partners, but living as allies. Well, living as allies is life-changing. So now when I'm angry, I stop and I think, how would an ally say, what the heck are you doing? And then I just don't use that tone. And I don't talk like that. And then sometimes when we're angry, we just go out for a drive. And eventually we get some coffee and park the car and we talk as allies. So that's sitting in cars with men. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it's thank you for your sweet faces and your cheers. So hello, Jackson. Hi, Sherry. These are two dear friends from Maine, my storytelling.
Yes. Oh, I am so thrilled to see you, Carol. It is just wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to pay you a compliment, not that I've ever done that before in all of our times together, but you're telling your facial expressions, your asides, your thinking processes reminded me of watching Patrick Stewart do his one-man show of A Christmas Carol.
Oh,
you were that magnificent. Moth may be one more of your fortes, which are so many, Love you, dear friend.
Love you too. Thank you. What a generous, Sherry's a very generous and sensitive woman. A sensitive
Oh.
woman.
I miss seeing you.
Me too.
I would echo what Sherry said. The inner dialogue was totally genuine,
Oh, good. Thank you,
and
Jackson.
it was very captivating. I didn't doubt that you were. It didn't feel like acting. It felt like you
Oh,
were
thank you.
actually processing all that.
Thank you. Yeah. I was trying to not say I realized, but show that I was coming to the realization. And for that, I have to thank a storyteller named Reggie Carpenter. She and I were working on the story, and I had said, I realize. And she went, I wouldn't say I realize. I'd try and show people how you realize that. So particularly, that was a really moment in the story that I was, quite anxious about. So thank you so much. Jackson is such an accomplished storyteller. So thank you. And Jackson knows how oppositional I can be with men.
Not just men.
Yes,
You're
you
right, Sherry.
really acted out the step-by-step, the thought processes that you were going through. And it was spellbinding.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You're a tremendous actor.
Yes.
Thank you. I think I'm good at showing how I feel.
Yes.
The great gift of my parents was I was allowed to show feelings. I was not allowed to be angry. Only Daddy got to be angry, but I was allowed to show how I felt, and I was allowed to say how I felt. I was stunned when I grew up and went to college and realized people didn't know how. They not only didn't say how they felt, they didn't know how they felt. But my parents were very passionate, very expressive, and I was allowed to say that how I felt. I was allowed to be greedy. I wasn't, like if there was one piece of cake left, I was allowed to say, oh, I want that cake. It didn't mean I got it, but I wasn't, I wasn't shushed. It was, well, maybe you'll have some, but we have to share, or something like that. I wasn't shamed for how I spoke, and it gave me permission to, how I feel shows on my face. And
Yes, well, you're articulate and expressive in these very specific ways in real life, I'm sure, but it's another thing you're able to do it on stage.
Thanks. All right, thanks. I'll take
It's
that compliment.
honest. It's very honest.
Yes.
And detail oriented. So many times when people are telling stories, they describe how they're feeling, or they gloss over how the characters are feeling, but you took us through it experientially.
Oh, good. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I was really scared to tell this. I can't tell you how much sweat I have running down my arms.
And that crucial moment where the blockage went aside. I'm still not really sure exactly why and how the blockage moved at that moment. It was when you realized that you didn't care what this fellow was saying, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't have to care as long as you were not in physical danger.
Yeah, I didn't have to care. Instead, I always felt like I had to make sure every man was happy, because I guess I felt like I had to make sure my daddy was always happy and felt good. And I resented it. I didn't like it. I gave away my power. So that was the moment when I realized I actually had power. And I would say it's a delayed realization, because I was in my late 20s. I mean, it was like, I think you're supposed to know that earlier, but I didn't. I just knew it in a different way. I just knew it in a different way.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to stop the recording at this moment. Is that okay?